I think that that's a great way to describe it. Is sometimes we are so familiar with the chaos, and there's a normalcy to it that it's comfortable. I often say anything that is familiar becomes comfortable. And so even though it was chaotic, even though there were these string of relationships or connections sexually, there was something typical and normal about it, and so it felt familiar. But I also like what you said. There was still a part of you intuitively that knew that something was off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That there was some part of this that wasn't who you wanted to be or how you wanted to live, and even an awareness that this wasn't sustainable, that this wasn't the kind of life that you wanted.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and here today with our regular host, Dr. Greg Miller. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing well.
It's good to see you. We have a very special guest with us today. It's the newest staff member here at Faithful and True. His name is Daniel Martinez, and Daniel comes to us from Texas, and he is our new Director of Connections. And on today's podcast, we're going to talk about just what is that?
Yep, exactly. And one of the things for those of you who have been watching our podcast, we have been introducing different team members as our staff has grown. And Daniel is brand new and plays an important role. And the title really says it all, that part of your responsibility is to help to create connections between faithful and true. And to whom? Who are we trying to connect to?
Yeah, when I took this position, and Debbie created the position, and when we took it, that was one of the big questions, okay, of the connections, who are we wanting to connect with? And a big part of it is the therapists, other therapists, working with them. How do we connect with them? I think a big challenge for me is churches. Mm-hmm. How can we connect with churches? How can we create that safe space for churches? And so that's really been kind of something that I'm really trying to work towards.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when the men come to our workshop, and also the women, we ask, how did you find out about it? And a significant percentage of people identified that it was through another person. So it might have been a therapist. That's one of our big referral sources. But we also know that family members, pastors, small group leaders, other church staff members, all of those help to contribute to the people who come to Faithful and True. And really kind of the vision is anyone that is connecting to us, we want to connect to them. And that kind of sets you up to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did the data. I ran the statistics on it and kind of dug through some data there. And for the statistics for how do they hear about us, the churches, like you said, or the therapists, like you said, was the highest. It was around 40%. Then we had the pastors. That was around 10%. Friends and family were around 30%. And this is for men and women. Right. And it's usually somebody like their husband has been through the workshop before, somebody like that. The books, about 3%. Podcast did great. It was 10% as well. So there's definitely some interesting findings in that study.
Now, how did you find your way to Faithful and True? How did you hear about it?
Yeah.
If we're talking about
drum roll.
Yeah, no. Well, it's a very long story. How long do we have here? No. Absolutely. Well, I have to tell a little bit about myself, I think, for it to kind of, go. So I was born in Illinois, raised in Texas, lived there my whole life. I was actually a firefighter in Texas. But, growing up and raised, I was raised in a very dysfunctional home. I had my mother and father, they divorced when I was 2 years old. My dad, he was a womanizer. I mean, that's just what he was. There's talk about generational sin. There's this joke in my family that my grandfather, he had a whole separate family down in Mexico. And the only way we found out about it was he was having chest pains. He goes to the hospital, thinks he's going to die. And he tells my grandmother, while he's there, hey, I got this other family. Well, it turned out to be indigestion. And so that all kind of came out, right? So I grew up in this very dysfunctional home. Nothing with church at all. Church was not, the only thing I remember seeing was a crucifix that my dad wore, But I bounced back and forth between my mother and father whenever money got really tight, and there's a lot of mouths to feed. And so my mom ended up remarrying and having a different family, and I was kind of with my dad for the rest of the time growing up, and so I grew up around this environment, and not knowing healthy, I grew up around chaos. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's all it was. I mean, my family was just chaos, and I was chaos internally, and just so I grew up, go to get onto the fire department. I'm working, and I'm cheating on my ex. For years, we ended up getting a divorce because then I didn't have the resources. I didn't know about Faithful and True. I didn't know about sexual addiction. That wasn't anything in my vocabulary because it was such a common thing around me growing up, seeing different women and and all of that. So and internally I knew it was wrong, but it's a normal wrong, So
well, I think that's a great way to describe it. Is sometimes we are so familiar with the chaos, and there's a normalcy to it that it's comfortable. I often say anything that is familiar becomes comfortable. And so even though it was chaotic, even though there were these string of relationships or connections sexually, there was something typical and normal about it, and so it felt familiar. But I also like what you said. There was still a part of you intuitively that knew that something was off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That there was some part of this that wasn't who you wanted to be or how you wanted to live, and even an awareness that this wasn't sustainable, that this wasn't the kind of life that you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm living this double life at that time, and it all comes out, and me and my ex, we divorce, and then it just gives me free reign to do whatever I want. I had no accountability. I was not in church. I wasn't even a believer at that time. And then, thankfully, I had people praying for me that I didn't know about. And so I finally come to faith. I finally, something's pulled, like there's something more. You start getting those deep down dark, those deep down questions of, it has to be something more in life. And I'm not happy with what I'm doing. This ain't working. And so I finally come to faith, and that's when the real kind of battle began. Being a single man who's known nothing but chaos his whole life. And so I remember one time that after acting out that I remember having this thought of I can't stop. Mm-hmm. Like this is not stopping at all. I cannot stop myself. Right. Something's wrong. I need help. And so I happened to read Patrick Carnes' book Out of the Shadows and Don't Call It Love. And then I read Mark Laaser's book, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Addiction. And I said, okay. And then
how did you even find those books? Did someone offer them to you, or did you do a Google search?
It was all Google at that time.
He's a great researcher.
Yeah. So I was so hungry when I came to faith. All I wanted to do was read, and so I just would search up anything and just read all of these books. And yeah, it was just by chance I just found Patrick Carnes, and then I don't remember how I don't know if he mentions Mark in his book, but I came to Mark, and then I just saw how Dr. Laaser incorporated the Christian faith, into those principles and values, and that's what I really wanted. But I didn't go right away. It was expensive, and I was broke. I was in debt. I was addicted. Addiction drives up debt.
Right.
So
addiction is expensive in a variety of different ways.
It costs in a lot of ways. And so I finally have another moment where I'm just like, yeah, this is gonna go really bad. I have to do whatever I can to stop. And so I was like, I'm gonna call Faithful and True, and I called Faithful and True. And I called in July of 2022, and I came up here in August of 2022. And I was so grateful to be a part of Dr. Greg Miller's. And I was up here, and how you talk about in the workshop is being fully known. And I remember I was holding on to these these dark secrets and just things that I just never wanted anybody to know, things that I was going to take to the grave.
Right.
And I remember you saying, hey, share that last 10, 20%. And I remember sitting in that group and sharing for the free. And I did not want to. I mean, the Holy Spirit was like, you're going to share this. And I was like, I don't want to share it. And so I ended up sharing it, of course. And when I shared it, it was like a weight just dropped from me. I mean, literally 100-pound weighted vest just dropped from me. And I felt known. But not only that, I felt known and accepted by the other guys there.
Well, and what's also true, what we talk about is that idea when we have the courage to speak that last 10, 20%, whatever it is, we get free from the shame. And we often talk about how shame is based upon lies, and those lies hold us hostage. And there is something profound about sharing and shedding that shame in a safe community. And part of what you experienced was the freedom that comes from the bondage, the fact that truth sets us free, and you were in a safe environment where it wasn't overwhelming, it wasn't too much, we weren't shocked, we didn't have a big reaction. So we could be with you in that. And I do think for a lot of men that come to our workshop, for those who do have the courage to speak that thing that is too much, they do have the very similar experience. I often say one of my favorite things is when a man says, I have never told anybody this before, and then he's able to speak it out loud.
Oh yeah. And that's exactly what I said. I have never shared this before. And I remember you were like, okay. And I was like, okay, and it kind of, just kind of went on from there. And so that was such an amazing experience for me. I had such a profound experience here at Faithful and True. I remember going back home, and even the guys I was friends with, I built accountability around that time, and getting into the church and plugged in. And I remember the guys were like, "Yeah, something happened up there," and I'm like, "It's just you're lighter, and coming back home." And so I came back home, and I started. I didn't do the next steps right away. I stopped the behavior, and I thought that was healing. Of course, we stopped the behavior. We just stopped the bleeding, really, And so time goes on, and I get into this relationship that I should have never got into, and that blows up in my face. And it was out of that relationship that I really understood, and it really showed me all those deep abandonment wounds, the core beliefs, just all of that inner childhood that it was there. I just didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. And so I started going to this amazing therapist, and we started working together. And for a year, a little over a year, that's all I did was do that core belief work, regulate my nervous system, because I didn't understand why I was attracted to people I shouldn't be attracted to, women I shouldn't be attracted. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why I was attracted to chaos.
What if we rephrase that?
Yeah.
Because that shouldn't stuff can be shaming. What if we just say, I was attracted to people that it wasn't helpful for me to be attracted to. Yeah. That these are good people. They are the beloved daughters of God.
Yes.
They have their own chaos. And so it really is about understanding what was going on with me that was wounded, that I kept gravitating towards that, realizing this is not helpful for me. It's not helpful for me relationally. It's not helpful for me to be sober. It's not helpful for me to kind of live the life that I think that God has called me to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the attachment wounds and all of that, that's absolutely. And so I just stopped and I just did the work. And God had me in such a place, and it was so hard. I always said stopping the behavior is the hardest, I think, and it takes the longest, in my opinion. Healing the core beliefs is the most painful. For me, it was. I know that it was. But I went through all the past childhood sexual abuse and physical abuse that I endured, and I worked and I reparented. A lot of that inner child, and so. From there, so after I'm working on myself, and I still work on myself, don't get me wrong. I think it's always an ongoing, thing. And then I'm working for the fire department, and I sense God is like telling me that it's going to be my last year in the fire department, and this was this past April, and I kind of wrestled with that for a little bit, and I was like, nobody. I'm 44, and I've been in the fire department for 21 years. Nobody just ups and retires like that. So it kind of took me a little bit. But I finally went up to my fire chief and said, hey, I think this is my last year in the fire department. And then a week later, Faithful and True sends out an email saying they're hiring for an administrative assistant. And
we're looking for a fireman.
Yeah. It's funny is I was applying for an administrative assistant position, and I emailed Debbie. The day it comes out, I email her, and this is my exact words is like, this may sound crazy, but I'm a firefighter from Texas, and I want to apply for this position. And I'm willing to relocate because I just knew. I knew that this is where I wanted to be. I knew that this is where God was showing me where to go. And she was like, yeah, let's do a little meet on Zoom. And we did, and did a little interview after that. And she was like, we're gonna create a position for you, Daniel. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that sounds great, Debbie. So,
well, and what is true is for the people who have gone through the program, for the people who come to the workshop and are in their own recovery journey, whether they do it here or somebody else, there is a different energy. There is this understanding. And so to be the director of the connections is so important because you understand what it's like to be that person who is in chaos and lost. And you also know what it is to find the resources and the importance of that. And so to be partnering with those people on this side, inviting them to come, I think is such a huge gift that you're able to give. And one of the things that we want people to know is that this connection piece is foundational to who we are.
Yeah.
That it was, Mark Laaser's vision was always to create relationships and connections with therapists around the country. So that they did have a place, where they could send someone for 3 days. And one of our things that we love to do is to have those people come here for 3 days and send them back to trained therapists and counselors who can continue the journey with them. And in no way do we replace what others are doing. We just want to be supportive of what it is that they're doing, whether it's the church or a small group or a counselor or a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the connections is so important too, because I remember, when I was in the small group at my church back in Texas, in Houston, we didn't know. We have these other studies, and these studies are they're not the deep, they're kind of, but we didn't have a lot of the resources. And I think it's so important to, trying to connect with those churches and saying, hey, this is what we have. This is the resources that we have. Because I just don't think that the info's out there,
right.
So
well, and part of it also is if I don't have an understanding of addiction, if I don't have the understanding of compulsive behavior, then I can easily judge someone who is struggling as just being not committed or lacking willpower or kind of not wanting to really do the work. But if I understand, okay, there's a complexity to this, and that's part of the word that I use is if we're going to get free, we have to understand that this is complex. It is about stopping a behavior, but it is also understanding what's driving the behavior. And using a fire image, you can work on the flames and put the flames out, but if it's a gas fire, until you get the gas turned off, the fire is going to continue. And so we want to partner with churches and educate them and help them to understand there are some ways that you can turn off the gas of the fire. You can turn off the fuel so that people can be successful in their recovery.
That was really good. Were you a firefighter?
He's our analogy machine.
Were you a firefighter, Greg?
Give him 2 minutes and he'll come up with a very relevant analogy.
You said something in there, and I think this was a kind of something that I remember hearing. I still kind of hear it from some buddies from back home. Is they're trying to be an accountability partner for somebody back at home. And they're just like, he won't stop doing it. He won't stop doing, it's a mental issue now. And I'm just like, there's more,
right.
There's more to it.
Yeah. Well, and part of it too is recognizing, another analogy is a car engine can be a great car engine. And yet if there's something that is not working, it's not going to run. And so we often say the question is never what's wrong with him. If someone is struggling, it's not what's wrong with you. It really is what is missing. Is part of what's missing is you don't understand the complexity of this issue, or is part of what's missing is you don't have the resources to support you in your recovery. Is part of what's missing is you don't have an understanding of what is needed and how to use those resources. A lot of times there will be guys, they are involved in groups, they have been to the workshop. Deb and I just did a podcast not that long ago on relapse and slips. And part of the reality is there are a lot of people out there that have these resources, but they're not maximizing them. And so, again, we don't ever want to shame somebody with the question of what's wrong with you, you can't stop. It really is, okay, what's missing from your program, or what are you not maximizing or stewarding in your program that keep you stuck in the chaos?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going on the other side is, now that I'm up here and I moved up here, and I'm living in Minnesota. I've been here since August 16th is, when I moved up here. And now being at a place where I don't have a lot of connection up here.
Right.
And it's that season of, thank goodness I went through the season I just went through where, I can connect with myself. I can feel and heal that part of me. But what's tough right now is having really not a lot of connections up here, and then it's like, okay, what am I doing up here? So
Right.
that's a tough. It's kind of a tough,
Well,
right
it's kind of the awakening to the reality of what have I done? Everything I know. It's not that Houston is Egypt, but it's that when the children were wandering
just outside of Egypt,
when the children were wandering in the wilderness, it did get to a place where they were questioning, why did we leave? It was easier where we were. It wasn't great, but it's better than wandering in the desert. And so it makes sense in a significant transition like this. There's always that piece of the in between. You're not fully out of Houston, but you're not fully here yet. I always use the image for you old people, the old Star Treks, where they would beam somebody up and down, and there was that point where they were fuzzy, and they weren't fully on the new space, but they weren't fully on the ship anymore. And that's a very vulnerable place to be. And so it is about reminding ourselves of the truth. It is about staying grounded in what brought us here, that commitment of, I think this is for me. And sometimes we just need to be reminded of that. I do have a question. So in all of the chaos, do you remember people who came into your life that in some way represented that life could be different? That maybe it was a coworker, maybe it was somebody that you went to school with. But one of the stories that I hear often is that everything around me was chaotic, but this person came into my life and in some way represented that there doesn't have to be chaos, or there doesn't have to be as much chaos.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a buddy down in Houston, and I remember, and I met him early on. I remember praying. There was a season I didn't really have anybody yet, and I was just, I converted. Became a believer, and then there was that kind of like that, just that season before you really kind of get plugged into a church. But eventually I did, and I met this guy, and we just became really close friends, and we're still close friends today. And I remember, just kind of looking at his life, and I remember thinking, and it was just kind of that, life doesn't have to be chaotic. You can have a stable life. I mean, he's not perfect by any means, but he's a lot more stable than I was at that time. But yeah, absolutely. And I had a couple of friends, but one really close friend that I can think of, I remember just looking and being like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want that stable, the peace.
Right.
I don't want the chaos. I want that peace.
Yeah. When I'm working with someone, there are typically two questions that I'll ask. And the first one is, do you want things to be better? And that is that question of desire. The other question is, do you believe that things can be better? And that's the question of possibility. And what's true is if they answer no to either one of those, it won't get better. Because if I don't want it to get better, it's not going to get better. And if I don't believe it can get better, it's not going to get better. Yeah. And one of the gifts, talking about connections, is for our listeners and for people who have been through our program, one of the best gifts that you give to someone is modeling that it can be better. That whatever chaos you're coming out of, that there is this opportunity to live freely. And that doesn't, like you said, it doesn't mean our life is perfect. It doesn't mean that we figured everything out. It doesn't mean that it's not difficult at times. It's just that we're not consumed in the chaos.
Yeah.
And it gives us an opportunity to move beyond that. And so, part of what we're hoping with the connections is that here at Faithful and True, we can be a safe place that people can come to, that you can send people to, whether you're a professional, whether you're a counselor or a therapist, whether you're a member of a staff or a part of a small group, that you can say, there's this place, you can go there for 3 days. And one of the things I want people to understand is in 3 days, your life is not going to be significantly transformed. You're still going to go back to whatever you left.
Yeah.
But what we do know is those 3 days allow people to experience hope, maybe in a way they haven't, to also be more open to change and to leave with less shame.
Yeah.
And we do believe that those three things together can really set someone and set them up well and create a trajectory for their recovery.
No, absolutely. I love one thing that you said is, you have to have the desire. Do you want to be well, and do you believe? And the believe part I struggled with for so long, and I think a lot of it probably was because of core beliefs. Faulty core beliefs. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. Therefore, I don't think it can get better. And it wasn't really, it was honestly really kind of lately that believe part really kind of settled in. I was just reading the Bible this morning, Mark 9 something, where Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe. Just believe. And I didn't really understand, or really didn't hit me on how important that truly, not just I believe, I truly believe I'm gonna get better. I truly believe I will heal from this.
And one thing that we often say around here is sometimes someone doesn't have that belief, and yet we can have that belief for them. When I was in seminary, I'm in a class, and my life at that point was really very challenging. And so in kind of a belligerent way, I raised my hand and asked the professor, is God's grace always sufficient? And he took a moment, he paused, and he said, well, for me, it has been. And I didn't know the professor well, but I knew some of the things that he had gone through, and he had experienced some tragedy. And it's not like I suddenly believed that God's grace was sufficient, but I believed that he believed it, and he had credibility because of what he had gone through. And so what happened was his belief was enough belief for me. And that's one of the gifts that we want to give. That's one of the connections that we want to make, is for people who are really struggling, believing that there's wellness, that there's healing, that there's transformation, that there's something for them. And we believe it. And we can believe it for you until you're able to believe it for yourself. So, Daniel, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
Great that you're on the team.
Yeah, we are blessed by Daniel being added to our team. And it was funny because Debbie didn't tell me about Daniel coming. I came in on a Monday morning and said, this is Daniel. He's your new roommate. And suddenly I was sharing my office, and it's worked out.
2 peas in a pie.
It's
Come on.
It's worked out beautifully. I'm so thrilled you're part of the team. So we want to thank everybody for listening and watching today, getting to know Daniel just a little bit. If you're a church out there that is looking to connect with Faithful and True, we invite you to reach out and call our main number and ask for Daniel. You'll have a very engaged conversation, and he will help you get connected to Faithful and True. In the meantime, we'd like to invite you to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many free resources to you, as well as all the information and online registration abilities for our 3-day intensive workshops. We offer the Men's Journey Workshop every month. We do the Women's Journey Workshop for the spouses. And then, again, 3 or 4 times a year, we offer 2 different couples journey workshops. All of that information is described at faithfulandtrue.com, and we invite you to check all of that out in advance. In the meantime, we hope that you've enjoyed today's podcast. We hope that the coming week for you will be a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.